All right, so we have the thumb, index, and pinky fingers somewhat developed at this point, and these two fingers here are still still mired in the land of being kind of Gumby-esque here. So it is a little bit of a challenge because we don't have particularly good reference images. So we're going to have to make some inferences here. So the first thing I'm probably going to want to do is make the fingers feel a little bit more fingery in terms of their consistency with regard to their where they get thick and where they get thin. Let me just take a glance at my reference information. So that's going to be actually a fairly useful view there. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it horizontally. Tap the Z key. And then there's something I want to point out. There can be a little bit of an issue with deleting the subdivisions and then rebuilding them. And you can see how nice and sharp and crisp some of this sculpting is here. Whereas over here, it's less so. And that's kind of the downside of deleting your lower history and then reconstructing your subdivisions. So the other thing that we can do, this is pretty much sitting at the origin. So if I decide I want to move it off the origin and then do a mirror and weld, which actually I think, well, so we'll do it one more time. We'll go to delete lower, and then this is going to be modified topology, mirror and weld. That's clearly not the axis I want. So I'm just going to rotate the whole thing. In fact, I'm going to do it using this tool here so that I can make sure if I alt click this guy, it'll center it, and then I can hold shift and get a direct 90 degree rotation, and that way my orthographic views are preserved. So now if I hit mirror and weld, it's probably going to be in the same spot. Yeah, okay, so that's where it thinks the center line is, which is totally fine. So we'll do a mirror and weld. So now I have these two separate hands, which means if I turn symmetry on, you can see, like if I want to work on this one, I can do so, and if I want to work on this one, I can do so. So we may try this approach and see how it works. So my symmetry is turned on, so if I move one, the other one will move as well. And I want to come back and go ahead and isolate this middle finger. And we can see where it lines up there. So I have this kind of almost like maybe a triangle shape right there that I like a lot and want to make sure that I nail. So I'm going to begin to dial that in. The front of the finger, like you can almost see, it looks like it's like a rectangle that tapers at one end. So we're going to use clay tubes to get in there and start to flatten that out a bit. I think we can probably widen up the knuckle. And I can see it bulges on that side, but over here it feels a little bit flat. So just to make it consistent, so a lot of this is just kind of looking at the silhouette as I rotate around and trying to even it out. And this is all just the clay tubes brush. And we will of course come in here and kind of pave that fingertip down a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and straighten that out just a bit more. There is probably some information there that is created by this knuckle, but without having a really good understanding of what it is, I'm going to assume it's probably pretty minimal. And we can look at some of the other, the index finger, whatever, to get a better sense for what that shape is actually doing. And because this is not happening in a vacuum, it's probably not a bad idea to show the other fingers. So I've got the flattened 4R4 here with the square alpha and the tightened fall off, the reduced focal shift value there. Just gonna let me come in here and begin to refine the planes of the finger. Even though it's mostly cylindrical, it's not entirely so. There are definitely parts of the finger that point directly down and definitely parts that point directly up. And maybe we can come over here with clay tubes, carve some of this stuff back, and begin building up a little bit of that knuckle structure and those tendons, which have a real interesting curve to them. So I want to make sure, but it still basically goes right up the middle of the arm, so I don't want to go too crazy with it. And they're all pretty parallel by the time you get up there. In fact, I think that's probably a vein. That's the tendon. So there are two that are pretty prominent. One of them disappears and one of them you can't really see. And I can see this finger has a little bit of a bow out to it, the index finger. And this is definitely one of those situations where you probably want to grab the Move Topological brush. But if I do it, I mean, the performance isn't really that bad. Gotta make it a little bit smaller because I also could just mask this stuff off here. Reduce the, I'm gonna have to rebuild the, or reconstruct the subdivisions here. So we'll mask the stuff I don't want to mess with. Give it some blurs. And now I can tweak it without worrying about, even with the Move Topological brush, it was still hitting this for some reason. And I'm looking at the negative space on the thumb there. I feel like I might have had that view not perfect. And these two have a little bit of a, I guess that's actually, I was going to say, I think this might be a little bit too low. And in fact, it might be. That's probably a little bit better. These two are about on the same level, so let's add a little more volume in here. Hit D a few times to get up to the highest subdivision level. I'm using the flattened 404 brush to refine some of that real crude sculpting for the tendons there. Alright, and in the next video we're going to take a look at this ring finger here and try to get it up to speed with the rest of them.